Anyway, the next speaker is Joel Jensen from Anglo. Joel is lead geophysicist in group discovery and geosciences at Anglo American, based in Vancouver. Prior to his current role, he was chief geophysicist at Teck Resources Limited, where he worked for 14 years. Joel's 20-plus years in mineral exploration has spanned exploration for diamonds, gold, zinc, lead, copper, and platinum, from 1,500 meters under the Bismarck Sea in Papua New Guinea to 4,200 meters above sea level in Peru, to the Arctic Circle at Red Dog in Alaska. He was an expat for 9 years, dragging his family with him to Guadalajara, Mexico, Santiago, Chile, and Brisbane, Australia. And a good deal of his current work at Anglo is in operational geoscience, including in-mine surveys for dewatering, hydrogeology, and tailings dam stability. He's a professional engineer in BC and is very pleased to be speaking to us today on natural fields EM. Thanks, Jim.
Thank you very much. I guess I'd like to thank, like my other speakers have, the organizers of Exploration 17 for inviting James and I to participate in this session, and Alan, you as well. You know, I have to admit, sometimes in the process of doing that, or of writing it, maybe I wasn't so excited, but it's good today. I'd also like to acknowledge the enormous contribution of my co-author, Jamin Crystal, and what he made to the text and the story we're telling today. And I'd encourage any of you to hunt him down and ask for his insights. The geophysical toolbox is filled with many technologies, but only a few of them are capable of the depth of investigation required to expand our view past the deposit scale. Those would be potential fields, reflection seismic, and natural source EM. Of those, the latter is clearly the method of choice if the goal is 3D conductivity imaging to kilometers depth, combined with ease of data collection. Over the past decade, these have become mainstream in mineral exploration, and recent advances in the joint inversion of ground and airborne data are making natural source methods an even more powerful tool for resolving complete mineral systems. And I guess I need to have this thing. Which one is it? Ah, very good. Our presentation today tells a quick story as to how we got here, what's happened since Exploration 07, a little bit about MT and ZTEM, some examples, and finally where we think we're headed. Our accompanying paper discusses history, theory, and technical advances in more depth, and also contains 14 examples, including ZTEM and MT results from Voisey's Bay that have never been published before. Time constraints mean that we can't go through all of these examples today in this talk, so if you're interested, you're just going to have to read the paper. The last 10 years has seen incremental improvements in magnetotellurics, a new airborne exploration technology called ZTEM, and new 2 and 3D inversion codes. Introduced commercially in late 2006 at Exploration 07, ZTEM was mentioned just once then, but since over 370,000 line kilometers of data have been acquired, clearly positioning itself in a place of prominence in our geophysical toolbox. Going back even further, 20 years ago, Frank Morrison and Ed Nichols presented an almost identically entitled paper. At that time, they said, there's been a significant increase in the past few years in the use of natural electromagnetic fields for mineral exploration. So I guess it's all kind of relative, because I think we're saying the same thing today. Those early days, and they marketed the method based on forward models. Today, Jamin and I are fortunate enough to be able to show data of some known mineral systems. Although none of the examples presented were discovered with natural source EM fields, the last 10 years has instead provided the time required to test these methods over known resources at the deposit scale to prove their worth. I think larger scale surveys beckon. With respect to physical properties, success over the next decade will require moving beyond just discussing physical properties and actually acting, I'm going to say, through research and data collection, so that we can understand our natural field data in terms of what Cam McQuaig outlined so well on Monday, the mineral system concept. That, I'm just going to read this, that focuses mineral exploration strategies on incorporating primary data sets that can map the critical elements of mineral systems at a variety of scales, and particularly the regional to camp scales needed to make exploration decisions. The subtitle for our paper could easily have been Integrating the Geosciences, the Challenge of Discovery, which is the tagline for this conference. To me, these items form a three-legged stool that collapses if any one leg fails. The mineral systems concept lists 4 elements of a mineral system, being fertility, favorable whole lithosphere architecture, favorable transient geodynamics, and preservation of the primary zone. The first 3 are critical for orogenesis, while the post-mineral preservation is key for ore discovery. In Cam's talk on Monday, he also drove home the importance of scale. Low-frequency natural source EM methods speak primarily to imaging the whole lithosphere architecture and play a role from the continental scale down to the deposit. If we're lucky, our survey results suggest that we're in a favorable area and we can continue exploring at the next smaller scale. The Athabasca Basin provides an excellent example of discoveries getting deeper over time. In the 1960s and 70s, prospectors used natural field gamma ray methods to search for glacier-deposited boulder terrains, which successfully guided exploration down to 200 meters depth and led to the discovery of the Key Lake deposits in 1975 to 76. In the 1980s and 90s, large loop active source EM methods got down to 600 meters, illuminating Cigar Lake and MacArthur River. Subsequent work at MacArthur River in the 2000s showed that AMT, audio magnetotellurics, could image the deposit too, and that the additional collection of the vertical component of the natural field, as Alan Jones noted yesterday, produces more accurate interpretations. As we explore deeper and our natural field EM data gets fuzzier, we need to better understand the mineral system and the relationship of conductivity to geology to be able to interpret the geophysical data we collect. With respect to magnetotellurics, the real beauty of the discovery of Canyard in this cohort is that by taking the ratio of the natural source electric to magnetic fields, no knowledge of the source strength is required to infer the Earth's resistivity. But an electric field observation is required to provide a direct observation of resistivity. And this is key. With respect to advances in MT, any one of the items on this list, I'm not going to go through them, deserves its own presentation. And hopefully, many or most of you went to Alan Jones's status quo Quo Vadis summary talk yesterday, because he did a good job, much better than I could do. ZTEM is often referred to as Airborne MT, mostly because it uses natural low-frequency EM fields. But it doesn't acquire electric field data, so by definition, it actually cannot be MT. Compared to MT, ZTEM has some definite technical drawbacks, besides the lack of an intrinsic resistivity measurements, as it can't resolve layered geology, and it has a limited bandwidth. However, those are more than compensated by its ability to collect data in remote and rugged locations, safely and economically. In the past 10 years, by far the biggest advancement in ZTEM was the onset of data inversion, first using 2D codes written by, or 2D code written by Phil Wanamaker, and later a 3D code written at UBC. Besides providing depth images, these methods eliminated the need to interpret up to 24 grid images that often look like those Rorschach plots. I don't know if you guys ever saw them, but they were interesting. A study of 109 in situ resistivity measurements from 4 porphyries in the southwest US by Nelson and Van Voorhis in 1983 helps to explain the link between resistivity and geology in a porphyry copper deposit, as shown in the schematic section by Scott Halley et al. For low weight percent or disseminated sulfides, resistivity will primarily reflect alteration, including the amount and composition of clay minerals, porosity, permeability, and fluid salinity. While at high weight percent sulfide, perhaps 5 to 7% from, let's say, bornite veins at depth, resistivity starts to reflect the conductivity of the copper mineralization. Between those two end members, there's a simple inverse linear relationship. Of the 14 examples presented in this paper, one is IOCG and probably truly provincial in nature or scale. 8 are over porphyry copper systems. 2 are from sediment-hosted copper deposits. 2 are from the Athabasca uranium basin. And the last one, as I said, never published before, is from Buzzards Bay. Like the others, it deserves its own presentation. But the examples I think that we're showing in this talk hopefully speak better to the mineral system concept. Bold names are the ones that are going to be discussed in the next few slides. Alan Jones showed this figure from Graham Heinsohn yesterday, and for good reason. It's a great example of MT illuminating deep aspects of an ore-forming system at Olympic Dam. With respect to this particular 2D MT inversion, it suggests altered remnants of fluid pathways connecting Olympic Dam and fluid reservoir. Compared to Dix-Silito's system, the similarities are strikingly evident, leading credence to the model. But as with any interpretation, Hindstein's inversion has garnered a lot of discussion with respect to how it should be interpreted, and there are multiple trains of thought and some dissenting opinions. But regardless of who's right, I think there's a quote by W. Edwards Deming that I think is very relevant to our work as geoscientists, and that's, "You can't expect what you don't inspect." Meaning that we need to go out and collect the data and just stop arm waving a bit too much. Deming is also the guy who said, "In God we trust, all others bring data." The first example is Collahuasi, which is this is not a natural field example, but it's an important part of the story. Collahuasi, and Yuhina in particular, is one of the earliest porphyry copper deposits discovered directly by targeting a geophysically defined conductor. What's shown here is ground resistivity collected in 1991 and originally published by Tony Watts in 2002. The high-grade vein system at Rosario was known, but Yuhina was an area under thick ignimbrite cover. The low resistivity anomaly over Yuhina was clearly of interest, but ironically, the first holes in the Yuhina targeted a booming but ultimately barren IP anomaly that flanked the resistivity low. Basically, it wasn't appreciated that a chalcocite blanket buried under 150 meters of ignimbrite could return such a low resistivity anomaly, although when they eventually did drill it, the discovery hole returned 62 meters at 2% copper. In the ensuing decade, the Yuhina discovery spurred entire exploration programs based on fixed-wing airborne EM targeting secondary supergene enrichment. Today, we appreciate that low-frequency natural fields will image these systems too, and to much greater depth. The paradigm has thus shifted from one of bump hunting enrichment blankets with TEM to imaging the entire porphyry system with airborne and ground natural source methods. The second example is Santa Cecilia in Chile. It's a gold-rich porphyry in Chile's Maricunga belt. A relatively high-frequency and hence shallow CSAMT survey initially identified a conductor that was subsequently drilled and returned over 1,000 meters of mineralization. The image displayed isn't from the CSAMT, it's actually a DC resistivity that was collected in 2012, but it clearly shows the conductive target. And why it's important is that survey at the same time collected MT data using Quantex Orion system. And this clearly puts the Santa Cecilia mineral system in context. The comment here about the free natural field EM data is that because when the transmitter for the DC survey is not transmitting, the receivers are still measuring the natural field data, and those time series can be added to the natural source response. In the Zambian copper belt, domes are important. At Kansanshi, the mineralization occurs primarily as high-angle veins occurring predominantly at the top of domes, and most are abundant near parasitic domes that bestow extra flexure on the main domes. Chris Wines has previously espoused targeting domes on domes as an effective exploration strategy. Although we like to think about direct detection, mapping geology of mineral systems is just as important, probably more important. Although these two sections are not collinear and there's some difference in their scaling, correlation between the conductive layer in the AMT and the domal shape of the carbonaceous phyllite is clear. The last example is from the Morrison calc-alkalic porphyry in British Columbia, which was the subject of Benjamin Lee's master's thesis at the University of Alberta and just recently published in Geophysical Prospecting. We're presenting it because it's an example of the way things are going to head, and that is combining sparse MT data with a more extensive ZTEM survey. Combining transfer functions from the two surveys forms a more complete picture of the mineral system, where the strengths of each data type compensate for the weaknesses of the other. Sasaki said, inversion of sparse AMT data was shown to be effective in providing a good initial model for ZTEM inversion. Moreover, simultaneously inverting both data sets led to better results than the sequential approach by enabling the identification of structural features that were difficult to resolve from the individual data sets. But there are challenges in doing this. It's not simple. Some of them appear trivial, and again, they're not. Coordinate rotations are things that many of us have not done since early in our university career, and MT is often northeast down. Some of the inversion codes are east-north up. Geotech has its own convention. How many ZTEM data do we keep? In our survey, we might have 10,000 ZTEM measurements, but our sparse MT may only be 20. If we just throw it all in together, the ZTEM data will overwhelm the inversion. How do we assess errors? How do we build the best mesh, especially if there's significant topography? How do we account for galvanic distortion in the MT data? And ultimately, we do have to reconcile the independent ZT and MT models. The point is that it sounds easy. Again, it's pretty complicated. However, in our experience, the results are worth the effort. In the panels to the right, Lee modified the errors on the MT data, essentially weighting them differently while keeping the error on the ZTEM constant. He concluded that 10% error led to the most realistic joint inversion. So, where are we going to go in the next 10 years? With respect to airborne systems, there are going to be, I think, advances in total field systems and some new total field systems. And there's a picture there of Geotech's Air MT system. There are going to be 3 component systems where we're actually going to orient these 3 coils in space. And there's going to be reductions in the low frequency limit. And I think Geotech is already making some advances in that aspect. With respect to ground systems, there will again be incremental improvements in technology. But I think we're going to change the way we collect data. So we will have some standard MT sites with E and H. We might have some sites where we collect H only, sites where we collect E only, and I think we're going to start collecting a lot more tipper data. There's going to be improved capacitive antennas and broadband coils. There may even be drones to position coils in magnetovariational surveys in areas that are otherwise difficult to access. I think we're hopefully going to see more large-scale surveys like USA Array and OSLAMP, and I'm going to predict that those are going to include airborne magnetovariational data. We're going to see better incorporation of hard and soft constraints and inversions, and hopefully we're going to have better understanding of the geophysical expression so we can answer some fundamental questions, such as why the lower conductivity. With respect to Alan Jones's comment yesterday that magnetotellurics is on a cusp, we think that the advances over the past 10 years and the ones to come in the next 10 years will continue to cement the role that natural field EM methods play in understanding the technology forum on Sunday was mentioned that we need to take up ideas and technologies from other industries. Like the earlier explorers who successfully applied new developments in 3D seismic technology to their knowledge of the petroleum system, the potential of 3D imaging with natural field EM rests in our ability to apply our understanding of mineral systems in the context of subsurface conductivity expressions. And with that, no work is complete without thanking of all the contributors, and Jamin and I had many. So thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Joel. We've got a few minutes for questions here. Any questions or comments? Yeah, and one thing I would like to, particularly for this paper, is to recommend that people go and look at the extended abstract. Joel and Jamin put an enormous effort into creating a great paper with lots of really good case histories here. So please look at the extended abstracts there. Any questions from the audience? Yeah, was there?
Jerry. I want to second your comments about the excellent exposition that Joel just gave us on the whole gamut of natural field, EM, and related applications. So I look forward to reading a more complete paper.
Yeah, and as Joel mentioned, we're kind of on the cusp, and there has been a discovery with, and I think it might be in the paper at Cobre Panama with an extension. The Balboa high-grade system there with ZTEM. And also, I'd encourage you to take a look at the Sukaro-Peki discovery by Reservoir Minerals et al. In Serbia, which was a CSMT discovery under 300 meters of recent cover. So one of the themes of this conference is moving under deep cover, and these are the tools we're going to need, and probably all of them together. And Joel, I just wonder, you have a comment about the transition from 2D to 3D inversion and what it meant to the process.
Well, I guess it made it more difficult. It takes a lot longer, but it does give us I guess a better, a more integrated view of the data that we collect, a bigger response.
Any other questions or comments? And I guess the other one I've been wondering about is, since we no longer need a transmitter, do you think we'll ever have drone ZTEM or drone TEM or whatever you want?
I guess we have, we could have some kind of drone TEM. My personal opinion is that the thing with drones is going to also do with payload and whether we're going to actually be allowed to fly things with that kind of payload. But I guess I don't see any reason why there couldn't be.
Yeah, and without a transmitter, it opens the door to multiple systems with a natural field EM system with mag and gravity or whatever you want. So it's pretty exciting. Should we move on?